I want to welcome everybody to this author event with Wendy Delaney. Um, this is an event for Stitch.net. Stitch.net is a global website in 88 countries all over the world, um, with large numbers of members in Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States, of course. Um, Tonight we have Wendy Delaney. She writes cozy mysteries, and I'm excited to say that actually I sat next to her in a writing mystery writers event. It was a workshop, and she was so nice, so kind, and so welcoming. And I was just thrilled to be sitting next to her because she's written several books. She writes cozy mysteries as what I'm trying to write. Just so happy, just so proud that she's agreed to come in to visit with us and let us know more about writing. Um, she's a very nice person and a great writer. I'm very proud and honored to present Wendy Delaney. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice of you to be here tonight, spend some time with me. I'm very glad to have been invited. As I said to Wendy earlier, this is very much an honor. It was very unexpected. So I kind of feel like I have hidden away in Texas. I'm glad that you found me, Wendy. As Wendy mentioned, I am a cozy mystery writer. I have 9 books out. I write a series. It's the Working Stiffs Mystery Series. And for those of you not familiar with cozy mysteries, it's a lighthearted mystery. This is not a hard-boiled detective story. This is very light in tone. Here's a couple of my book covers. They're supposed to be fun. You can usually tell from the covers that the book is just going to be light in tone. Typically, a cozy mystery will have a depiction of the small town, some sort of scene on it, something that has to do with the plot. They're typically set in small towns. There's not going to be violence on the page. The name implies what it is. It's a cozy, comfortable, have a cup of tea, grab a cookie, and have a fun read. The victim is typically killed off stage. If you remember the TV show with Angela Lansbury, Murder, She Wrote, that's a cozy mystery turned into a TV show. It's the small town, it's the amateur sleuth. The thing about Angela Lansbury's character, Jessica Fletcher's, that the people she knew kept dying. And I thought, that could be a problem in a really small town, because if I'm going to have a sleuth who works in a very small town and half the people she knows dies, then it's, after a point in time, it just seems like, well, this is a really dangerous place to live. The murder rate's really high. And I thought, I don't think I want to do that. So back in 2010, when I first kind of got the idea that I think I want to write cozy, I had been a romance writer and was struggling with that a bit, which we'll get into. But I decided I want to try writing a cozy. And I was reading them and thought, okay, yes, small town, there could be a romance subplot, perfect. Light in tone, a lot of them are just sort of fun reads, great. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. But I don't want to follow the Jessica Fletcher model and have a whole lot of people that she knows die. So I put her in a job where she could work for the county coroner, and I would have a larger population base. I thought just regionally, that would make sense. I could have a variety of places where I could have people die. She could investigate. She wouldn't necessarily know them. And I thought that could work very well. And yes, I have really interesting internet search history about how to kill people and poisons and all that kind of thing. It's kind of like, people would think I'm a really dangerous person by the kind of stuff I look up. But that's what we do. We research when we're writing. So, like I said, so I put her in an environment where she had a larger population base to work with. And I had stumbled upon a blog. I don't even know what I was looking up. I was researching something, and you know how one thing can lead to another on the internet. And I ran into a blog written by a woman who is a human lie detector. She's that very small percent of the population. She's one of those people who can just tell when somebody's lying. If you remember, there was a show on TV, at least on American TV, Lie to Me, in the, 2012-ish, 2013. And that came out as I was developing my book with people with the same ability. And I thought, well, crap, this is bad timing. We both have the same idea. But then that show got canceled, and I thought, okay, fine. I have smooth sailing. I can just continue with my idea, because it was based on this woman's ability and how she would be able to tell if somebody was lying. It's the little micro expressions that they're honing in on, that they can see. I do not have this ability. Somebody can lie to my face and I won't know. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have a character who could tell that somebody is lying? But she's never been in police work. She's never been involved in any kind of profession where she was using this skill. And I thought, okay, it would be interesting for her to come back to her hometown, where people kind of know her as that weird kid who used to be kind of called freaky because she could tell when people were lying. So I had a concept, but I needed to give her a job. And then I also, researching, discovered that there are counties in Western Washington, maybe throughout all of Washington, where I used to live, Washington State, where they're very rural, they have small populations, and they don't have coroners. They have elected officials who are the prosecutor coroner. And I thought, okay, this could be good. This could work out very well. And it so happened that this prosecutor coroner of a small county on the peninsula, if you know where Port Townsend is, she was located in Port Townsend. She had her email address up on a website, and I thought, what do I have to lose? I wrote her an email and said, I'm a writer and I'm looking for some information, and I have a character, and I'm very interested in setting my book in a town like yours, in a county like yours. And eventually she went, after several emails were exchanged, she was going, where do you live? Why don't you just come over and visit me? And I thought, okay, perfect. This woman's being very kind, and I'm certainly not going to say no. So I hopped on a ferry, left Seattle, went to Port Townsend, and spent the day with this very wonderful person who was so helpful to me in being able to confirm to me that, yes, she would hire somebody with my character's ability in a heartbeat. She has a staff of people who are deputy coroners, who they are deputized so that they can represent the coroner's office and do investigative work, like, picking up the phone and calling someone, or knocking on a door and asking some questions. Or the one person was in charge of grabbing all the prescription medication in a person who had died in their home, and they had to retrieve the medications and put them for safekeeping, probably test them. But I thought, okay, there's various people in this office that have responsibilities working for the coroner's office. and they're administrative people. I thought, perfect. They don't have to be terribly skilled, excuse me. They can just kind of, in a fictional environment, my character could work there and be an amateur sleuth. So I knew I was onto something. So this is 2011-ish, 2012, I'm writing. I'm developing the story. I'm developing the series. I'm planning it out. And in 2013, I published my first book. Now, as I mentioned, I didn't start writing mysteries. I started writing romance. I was very late to even reading romance. I didn't read my first romance until I was over 40. That just wasn't something that I read. I don't know if I poo-pooed it because it was something my mother read or what it was, but I didn't realize how good a lot of these romances are. Some of my favorite books from my favorite authors are romance authors. They're just wonderful. They're fun. They're witty. Back in the day, we're talking about the 90s, before Amazon, when we went to bookstores, I ran into a bookseller. I must have told her, gee, I'm looking for something new to read. And she said, have you ever read anything by Susan Elizabeth Phillips, a romance writer? I thought, no, I've never even heard of her. Well, she turned me on to some new book by Susan Elizabeth Phillips, and I just fell in love. I thought this was just the type of book that I had been looking for, at least at the time. And I had been reading thrillers. I had been reading literary fiction. I was a huge Daphne du Maurier fan, Jane Austen. So I had been kind of romance adjacent, but I hadn't been reading romance novels, the romance novels of the 80s and the 90s. Well, there's a lot of good books in there. And I discovered that I really liked them. And some of them just were laugh out loud funny. They had the tone that I liked. They were just fun escapism. And they resonated with me. And I decided then and there that this book that I've been saying I want to write someday, I want to write a romance. Now, my husband was not real thrilled with the idea when his wife with a full-time job that was making decent money said, I really would like to write a romance book. So we started out slow. He was just perfectly fine with me taking classes. It's just like, don't quit your day job, which I would recommend to anybody who's getting into writing. Don't quit your day job. When it's time to leave the day job and become a full-time writer, you'll know. So I started taking classes. I really immersed myself in reading and studying. And I spent a good chunk of the 90s just reading and researching and figuring out what kind of book do I want to write. And along the way, I was reading, as I said, Susan Elizabeth Phillips. I was reading Jennifer Cruzy, Jane Ann Krantz, Davy Maycomer. There were just a lot of big names. And I thought, okay, some of these writers are just beautiful writers. And I would, if I could even dare to think that I could write something like what they write, but I thought I would give it a try. It was something I always had in the back of my mind, this someday I'm going to write a book. I just didn't know when that day was going to be, if it was ever going to be, and I didn't know what I wanted to write. And then it started shaping up to be, well, I want to write a romance. Well, that's easier said than done. Romance fiction, for me, is not easy to write. It has emotional underpinnings, as I soon discovered that I found challenging to get through the first few chapters and into the middle without the whole plot just kind of petering out. And I realized, as much as I wanted to do this, I don't know if romance writing is for me. I love to read it, but maybe I could write something else, a romance subplot, but with a story that has a little more structure to it, that there's something that happens in the beginning that will carry through to the end, not just boy meets girl and what we expect to see in a romance novel. So that after many workshops, conferences, failed attempts at writing, I decided cozy mystery. I think cozy mystery is for me. And I started looking at the story structure of a mystery, which is something I want to get into, even though story structure kind of sounds like a dry topic. Because we're probably all readers here, and movie watchers, TV viewers, we know story structure. We might not call it that, but we know it when we see it. These are things that we're familiar with. We just might not put labels on them. But I think there are things that readers look for in a book or a movie, a TV show, any kind of popular fiction. And when I say book, I'm referring to commercial fiction. So not the literary fiction. We're talking commercial fiction here. So I have a short list here, and this varies by taste, of course, but I think readers are looking for characters they can relate to. If a character is too off the wall, like I'm not going to relate to a robot character unless that robot has feelings, is feeling something like I would feel. Then I will have a chance to relate to that robot character. But otherwise, I really think that readers often read to have connection to a character, connection to a place, experience an adventure. In the case of mysteries, it's to follow along with the sleuth and discover clues, put the puzzle pieces together to solve the mystery. We read for a sense of community or place that we enjoy going to. Now, again, this could be a place that is a galaxy far, far away. This could be a place like I created that's sort of a mirror image of Port Townsend in Western Washington, the coastal community, historic community, and it's a small town, and it has a watering hole. You know, there's little restaurants, favorite places to hang out, and people are going to go and grab coffee, they're going to have burgers, and they're going to gossip. And these places, whether they be real or fictional, these places are places that we as readers, as viewers, we enjoy going to. So perhaps in historical fiction, it's that time in history that we find fascinating. It's a place where maybe there's a castle and there's a king in the castle and there's castle intrigue, but there's things about it that we enjoy, this sense of place. So I think we're looking for that in some of our favorite books. We want entertainment. We want to be taken away to some place. It's escapism. We want a place where we can discover a story world through a character's eyes. We can step into their shoes and experience what they're experiencing. We can get on Harry Potter's broomstick and soar. There's this sense of adventure in another story world that I think we enjoy, and it's just downright escapism often. But I think it's a form of amusement often as well, with when we discover writers that we, favorite authors that we read everything they write, it's because I think they speak to us in some way. We connect with them and we enjoy that sense of connection. We read to derive a sense of satisfaction. in this fictional world where good will conquer evil, justice will prevail, the story world will be made right in the end. Indiana Jones is going to get the elixir and bring it back to that village and save the day and free the children. You know, right is going to win, and our story world will be restored to order. So in a romance, this is the happily ever after. In a mystery, this is the sleuth solving the mystery. In a thriller, this is the bad guy being discovered and being captured or put down in some way so that order can once again be restored. And we want a story that's well paced. We want a story that is compelling, that a story in which something happens. Because a story that is not compelling, one that doesn't have us turning the pages, is a problem. And this is something that I think we're trained to look for at an early age. We expect, because of that once upon a time that we were told way back when, once upon a time, there was a, XYZ. Story begins. So we have that ingrained in us of there is a structure to this. It has a beginning. So let's talk about story structure. Most commercial fiction follows a basic story structure. There's a beginning and a middle and an end, and events occur that lead to the midpoint. It's kind of like a tent. There's a pole that props up the tent, that there's a middle. There's something that's going to happen in the middle. And there is action, there's a love scene, there's a betrayal, there's another dead body, we think we're capturing the bad guy and the bad guy gets away. Something happens that propels the story forward. And then to the 3/4 mark, something else will happen that will propel us towards the end. So there's this story structure that I think we understand, whether we really are conscious of it or not. We kind of expect it and have a innate understanding of it. So let's dig into that a little bit more, and let's talk about story goals. So in the beginning of a story, as I said, something happens. We have come to understand that there's something that kicks off a story. My husband and I are watching a TV show right now. It starts with a funeral scene. Something has happened, and we expect that something else will happen. Someone's going to say something at this funeral. We've seen it a million times. There's going to be some family intrigue. There's going to be an argument. Somebody's going to get drunk at the funeral. Something is going to happen. So this setup with a funeral scene is commonly used because it brings people together, and it's a good way, it's a handy way, let's put it that way, to kick a story off. So something happens in the first chapter, or at least by the second chapter of a commercial fiction book. First scene, or in the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of a movie, something happens to propel the story forward. And that is called the inciting incident. Trouble arrives. Trouble in the form of anything. Somebody loses their job. This is a day that's going to be different for some reason. A storm is brewing. A storm has already swept through the area. A dead body is discovered. Somebody screams, something happens. This is a day that will be different, and something is set in motion. So we've seen this lots and lots of times. Bad news arrives. or if it's not necessarily bad, it's news of a sort that will change things. So a story goal emerges from that. Because we have characters who want something, let's go back to that funeral scene. There are characters at the funeral that maybe they're looking forward to the will being read and they're jockeying for position. And there's one person that we're going to focus on. And maybe this was the wife of the person whose funeral it is. And this wife is a major stakeholder, and we care the most about what's going to happen to her. She has young children, whatever the situation may be. And we want to know what's going to happen to her, because we have this family of, we'll just say, vipers that want the money, and she's possibly going to be put in some sort of dangerous situation. So she has a story goal to inherit the money, to get past this funeral, to get past this loss. And from there, maybe another story goal is going to emerge. The person who lost their job at the beginning of the movie or book, their story goal is to get another job. They need to start over. An orphan is sent to live with distant relatives. Their story goal is to make this new life work. They may not be conscious of that, being a child, but their life is going to change, and their story goal will be to adapt in some way and figure out how to make a life with these new people. So in the beginning of a story, we have people with goals. We don't have a story unless we have people with goals, people who want something. So they need to be opposing goals. It can't just be easy of, okay, I want a job, got a job. Chapter 2, love the job. Chapter 3, met the man of my dreams. End of chapter 3, type the end. Well, that's a very short book. So there needs to be some problems along the way. Someone else who may be making trouble for that person at their new job, whatever the situation will be. So we need characters with opposing goals. Think Dorothy and the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz. They had opposing goals. They both want the ruby slippers. The Good Witch of the North tells Dorothy, hang on to those ruby slippers. The Wicked Witch wouldn't want them unless they had some special power. So, don't let go of those ruby slippers. And the Wicked Witch is saying, give me those ruby slippers. You don't know how to use them. I want them. So it's a power struggle over those ruby slippers. They are opposing characters. So, Dorothy wants to get home. That's her story goal. But standing in her way to get those ruby slippers is the Wicked Witch. So that's the opposition character. This is often referred to two dogs and one bone. It's the ideal kind of creation of conflict because there's going to be a natural struggle. Two forces are going to be in opposition over the prize, whatever the prize might be. In my books, my main character's name is Charmaine. She's often conducting her own investigation, while Steve, her childhood friend and the detective in town, is conducting the official investigation. And they clash. He does not want her interfering in an official investigation. And her attitude is, well, hey, Buster, I'm a deputy coroner now, and I have every right to do some investigating. Of course, she's doing more snooping than investigating, but at the same time, she's a sleuth. That's what she does. But so this is going to be a light-hearted clash, but they're still opposition characters. They are opposition characters with a romantic attraction. So this is going to play out in a lighthearted way, but it's still two dogs and one bone. There's an investigation, and they both have stakes in it. So this struggle that we're referring to is conflict, and that is an essential component in story structure. So when there's a good goal with motivated characters and there's plenty of ups and downs as the story progresses, that's what we want. We want to know as readers, well, what's going to happen next? It's compelling. We are turning those pages. We've all read books with compelling plots. We have probably all read books that weren't so compelling. Honestly, I'm reading one right now. I've been reading it for the better part of 2 weeks. It's more of a fan fiction that I thought would just be kind of fun to read. It's a continuation of the North and South story, if you're familiar with that novel, or the miniseries, the BBC show from, I don't know what year it was, 2004 or 5, somewhere around there. I love that show. I've watched it a bazillion times. I had a hip replacement. It just binged it. I would watch it over and over and over again. So I thought, okay, it would be fun to spend some time in that story world. And so the story ends, and this book that I've been reading for off and on for the last couple of weeks picks up where the series left off, kind of. There's a few changes, but basically she's just kind of continuing a story that ended. Well, that in itself is kind of a problem, but I thought, okay, I enjoy the story world, so let's see what happens. Let's see what you do with this, because I as a writer am curious, and I enjoy the story world, so I thought, okay, I'll probably enjoy this. And I did for a while. And then after 100 pages with happy characters where everything's great and they've got a wonderful marriage and they're very happy with one another, and even the standoffish mother-in-law is coming around to really like this new wife of her sons, and everything's great. And it's kind of boring because it's not compelling. It doesn't have very much conflict. In fact, it has very little conflict. It has a teensy bit of residual conflict from the TV show, the TV series of kind of what's going to happen with the mill that the guy owns, but it's missing something, and the thing that it's missing is conflict. And because of that, it's not compelling. And it's not a page turner. I enjoyed it for a while, and then it kind of became boring. And that's the last thing that I, as a writer, want to do, is bore my readers. So that is a lesson that I learned a long time ago. And this was just an affirmation of that, of, don't have happy characters, because happy, when nothing is going wrong, there are no problems, there's no mystery to be solved, life is awesome, then there's not much of a story. I may fast forward through this book and just kind of see how it ends, because I'm curious, but I don't know. Honestly, I haven't touched it for a while, so that kind of tells me already I'm sort of mentally done with it. I've already checked out, because I don't care at this point really how it ends. I know they're going to be happy. They're going to have a happily ever after. She wouldn't dare have happy characters and then go, and then he died, and then she mourned, the end. That would just be cruel. So that's not going to happen. I'm sure that's not going to happen. And now I'm going to have to read to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, but that is a real life example of when conflict is missing, so is the impact that we're looking for as authors of the conflict creating the page turner. It will not exist without conflict. And for those of you who are writers or are interested in learning more about this, this is an awesome book, if you can see it here. This is Scene and Structure by Jack Bickham. It's a Writer's Digest book that I've had probably for, I don't know, maybe 25 years. How to construct fiction with scene-by-scene flow, logic, and readability. And this was what I needed to read prior to publishing. That kind of solidified in my mind what good fiction was and what I needed to do to write a book that readers would want to read every page, that would not put it down and say, I'm not interested in finishing this book. It's my goal to write books that are fun, but are also compelling reads, that you want to find out what's going to happen next, because there's a story arc to the book, but there's also a series arc in which things are happening throughout the series. There's threads that are being pulled of relationships throughout the series. There's a mother and daughter relationship. There's wounds to be healed. Of course, I'm writing something light, something more comedic in tone, but this character, Charmaine, that I created, my human lie detector, she's flawed. She's as much of a real person as a fictional person can be in a story world. She's a person that has emotional baggage. She's got a background. She's got hopes and dreams. She had emotional wounds. She had a husband who left her. Her mother was not a mother that wanted a very close relationship in the beginning. Her mother was an actress and was much more focused on her career. So Charmaine was raised by her grandmother, and now her mother wants to be back in her life. Well, after 30 years of not really trusting this person to be around and, show up for the school play when she said she was coming and then she doesn't, and that sort of thing. Healing just doesn't happen overnight. So the healing will take place over the course of the series. And it's something that I hope readers enjoy, seeing the developing relationships between Charmaine and Steve, the detective, Charmaine and her mother, Charmaine and her grandmother, the various people in town that she has relationships with, because these play out through the series of the book. And, it's my job to make it interesting, but that's part of writing a series with structure as well as a book with structure, is that we want the series to have a beginning and a middle and an end as well. So don't know when that end's going to come, but someday when I don't want to do this anymore. So as I was talking about, Charmaine, I've tried to make her into a person with flaws, imperfections. She struggles with her weight. I struggle with my weight, so that was easy to write. She doesn't wake up in the morning with perfect hair, and she needs her caffeine to get going in the morning. I want her to feel like a real person. I want readers to enjoy spending time with her. Nobody likes perfect. If we wanted to read about perfect people okay, I'm getting myself into trouble here, but maybe we'd want to watch a episode of the Kardashians or something. I don't know. I don't watch that show. But the idea of spending time with people that we want to spend time with, that I think is part of writing a book, a series in which there's a community. Now, Stitch is all about community. So I'm sure you guys get exactly where I'm coming from, of wanting to be part of something, wanting to feel like you're welcome in this community that I've created in my series. And so I try to make it as welcoming for readers as possible, with fun characters and situations that I hope that they'll enjoy. So back to story structure. There's going to be ups and downs. There's not going to be situations that throughout a book, it's just smooth sailing. We need action and reaction. We need hills and valleys. We need our story people to face challenges, to be tested, to, we don't want Indiana Jones to just walk into some, non-dangerous situation, grab the elixir and return back. What fun is that? We want the adventure. We want the ride. So we want a book, going back to just talking about fiction here, we want a book with a compelling beginning, middle, and end, something that we enjoy reading, something that we enjoy spending time with. And that's my goal as an author. That's the kind of book that I want to write. Now, talking about characters with goals and story people with goals, I'm an author with goals. A lot of us have goals. It's January. It's the perfect time to talk about goals, right? So as we're looking at this new year and we're maybe thinking about, gee, what do I want to accomplish this year? Maybe you've got some resolutions. Maybe there's some goals that you have in mind. Maybe there's a someday goal that like I had way back when. I don't know what year it was, 1995-ish, somewhere around there. Someday I'm going to write a book. And then it became, I'm going to take action on this. And it's not going to be a someday goal anymore. It's going to be a now goal. And so maybe this is the year for you, for all of us, to kind of think about, well, what would we like to do? What would we like to accomplish this year? Because they don't have to be someday goals. They can be, if we have something that we want to do and we have the time and energy to pursue it, it can be a right now goal. And I came at this rather late in life, as you can tell by the gray hair here. So it's never too late. So if you have a goal that you want to pursue, I say go for it. This year could be your year. So that's pretty much all I have. I think we have time for questions. Wendy, do we have plenty of time for questions? Do we want to,
yes,
what do you want to do?
Well, this has been absolutely awesome. You're awesome.
Oh, good.
Fabulous. I'm just so excited about everything that everybody's been able to learn from you. And I'm just so happy that you came. And of course, we want you to come back. I would love to have people ask questions and make a comment. You might want to ask a question, or who would like to start?
I've got tons of them.
Okay.
Awesome. Fire away.
Okay, first off, I'm a romance writer. I write short stories that sometimes go over into novellas. I tried writing novels years ago. I've never been diagnosed with ADHD, but I lose interest in my own stories.
Yeah.
Nobody else does. They get mad at me when I stop part of the way through it. I guess what I'm asking is if I go back to trying to write the novels, how do you keep an interest in it? How do you keep being bored with it?
Well, I think if you have characters that you really are invested in and you give them, like we were talking about, story goals where it's important, if you have a story where there are stakes in that story, what kind of romance do you write? Is it contemporary romance, historical
Mostly,
romance?
yeah. Every now and then historical, but mostly contemporary.
Contemporary, okay.
Mhm.
So first off, romance, I think, is very difficult to write. People do not realize how difficult it is because it's all about emotion and character. And because that has to drive the story. There has to be some situation that's going to propel your plot with these two characters in opposition. But like with what was the movie? Not Sleepless in Seattle. The one with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks.
You've got mail?
You've Got Mail. Thank you. They're opposition characters that at some point do not like one another. He is the enemy. And once the love interest becomes the enemy, that starts getting very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
if these people are going to fall in love, and there are most likely going to be either sex scenes on the page or behind a bedroom door, if they're going to get together and they are enemies, that's complicated. How is that going to work? So there's a fine line, I think. It worked in that movie, in my opinion. It worked because they were in love with one another via email. That's where they fell in love. It was the reality of the situation where she didn't know he was the same guy that she was exchanging mail with, who had the big evil bookstore, who was going to put her out of business as a small-time bookseller. So she didn't realize that he was the same guy that she was exchanging emails with. So that helped make it work. But in a romance novel that you're writing, when you have two opposition characters that are the love interests, I found that virtually impossible to do. Now, as I said, I tried to write romance. I finished one romance. Are you a member of Romance Writers of America?
No.
Or have you heard of them? Do you know what
Yes. Yeah, I've heard of them.
The Golden Heart contest was? So I was a Golden Heart finalist with that book. And it was so affirming to know that some judges thought my book was good enough to final in a major contest. That was huge for me. That was around, I don't know, 2004 or 5, somewhere around there. And that was just super affirming. But to write another one and then another one after that, I just didn't think I could do it, because for me, it is difficult because I want to put characters in opposition with one another, but you can't do that for very long in a romance, because the romance, the love, the characters are going to fall in love with one another. I mean, that is the nature of the romance. They may not like one another in the beginning, or there's going to be some issue that they have with one another. They're going to work through their issues, and then eventually they are going to see their way to say, I love you too, and let's have a relationship going forward. And typically, let's get married and have babies. And beautiful, that's great. But to make it interesting along the way for you, for your readers, for the characters themselves, I mean, you do need to come up with some strong conflict and a strong plot. And it's honestly, it's not always easy. I found, even though people think, oh, romance, these, light, fun little books that, and
No,
and
not
some
the ones I
authors,
write.
yeah, some authors pump them out beautifully. I mean,
Mhm.
look at Debbie Maycomer. What does she have? 100 books out? I don't even know what the count is.
Yeah, there's a saying. There's a saying. One very successful romance writer once said of Nora Roberts, very enviously, she gets in the shower, writes one, gets out of the shower, writes another, gets dressed, writes another one. But
yeah, but sit down and try to do it. It's hard.
It is very hard
because of the, I think, because of the nature of the conflict, because it's an emotional story. So my best advice is to have a plot that has good conflict, but has another character or something in opposition, so that the two leads, your heroine and hero, can become allies along the way. And maybe, they become allies at midpoint. And then from there on, in the middle of the book, and then from there on, they're able to, fight the bad guy, all that kind of stuff. Romantic suspense is great for that, because they need to be allies who are in a suspenseful, dangerous situation, and there's bonding in there. So romantic suspense is a great example of really a more plot driven, but contemporary romance, much more character driven.
Let me ask you another thing. You were talking about early on how you went from being a romance writer to being a mystery writer, cozy mystery writer. I have a very pushy muse. I am convinced that my muse is male because he's such a pain in the butt. What I've got is, in my conscious life, which he runs as well, I write the romances, and I'm happy writing the short stories and the novellas. Okay. But in my dreams, when I'm sleeping, I dream whole stories. I mean, from beginning, middle, end. And
I wish I would do that.
But they're always mysteries.
Ooh.
Or they're thrillers.
Yeah.
And so it's a little daunting. Here I am. I've got my little niche. I've got my following and all this other stuff. But I've got these things going on in my head. Some of these are really good stories. But how do I remove myself? Short stories over here, but I've got to give voice to the stuff going through my head. Again, my pushy muse. So
this
I guess
that's a great problem to have. This is a wonderful problem to have. You're dreaming stories. I've never dreamt a story in my life.
No, and I do this. Yeah, full stories. And so obviously I'm meant to take this stuff and put it down on paper. But it's very daunting because my experience writing novel, I wrote two way back in the day, and I didn't like writing the novels. I just did not like writing. I couldn't keep my attention or any of that. But this stuff is coming to me done. It's just a matter of getting it down on paper. But it's daunting.
Let me just say, books are getting shorter. Attention spans of our audience, our readers, are honestly getting shorter, thanks, I think, to the internet and just Netflix and everything else, all the streaming options that we have, that our attention span is just, I think, naturally shorter than it used to be. And books are expensive to produce. So talking about paperbacks, not ebooks. If you wanted to be published by a New York publisher, you submitted 100,000 words for a suspense novel, say, they'd probably want you to cut 10,000 words. to make it a little shorter, just because the cost of paper and, until you're a big name, James Patterson can write any length book that he wants, but we can't. So, so shorter books are what people are looking for. My books are typically 65 to 70,000 words. So novella is what, maybe 35 to 40,000? Is that your typical length for a novella?
I've never counted words.
Yeah, so a shorter mystery, a cozy mystery is around 65K. Thrillers and more traditional suspense that kind of sounds like what you're dreaming.
No, yeah.
Not 90,000, but you know what? You could use your romance writing skills, have a romance subplot, and have what you're dreaming, your stories, have those be your main plot. Why not? You might flesh out one of those, just kind of write it out, sort of maybe even whiteboard it of, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, and see if you're interested in actually writing it. Because it sounds like you have some wonderful ideas and maybe just need to pick one and run with it.
Yeah, I've got one in particular. I dreamt way back when I was in college in 1999 or something like that. And my academic advisor, who is still a close friend, has told me repeatedly, have you wrote yet? Have you wrote it yet? Have you wrote it yet? No, not yet. So
yeah, well, it might be time. Maybe this is your year to do that.
Yeah, it'll make her happy.
It might make you happy too.
Okay, I want to include somebody else because we just lost Mary from Australia. Does anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask? Lori from New Jersey.
This is a quick question. What was I liked your suggestion of the book on scene and structure. Who was the author of that again?
Yeah, Jack Bickham, Bickham. It's Scene and Structure. I know it's available on Amazon because I was looking for it last year. So even though it's probably out of print, I think it's available as an ebook. So this is the old Writer's Digest version of it.
No, I appreciate that. I'm interested in writing space operas. And I know one of the biggest problems is that you've got so many characters and you want to introduce them in the beginning. It's hard to be compelling. And so I thank you for talking about being compelling in that. But do you have any more suggestions when you've got lots of characters of how to keep that interest up?
You don't want, right. It's difficult to introduce a lot of characters in an opening chapter, or just think of it as a movie. If a heist movie, and an old movie is running through my head right now. I can't even remember who was in it. The one that played Furiosa's in it. They're all driving minis, and there's so many people to keep track of. I kind of remember just thinking, okay, is this person important? Is this person important? Am I supposed to remember this person? The stars of the movie are the ones I figure are going to be the main characters. But when you're talking about a book, the reader is kind of like a baby duck and wants to glom on to the important characters. Who's going to lead me forward? And so you really want to use some caution in the beginning of not introducing so many characters that it's confusing, and then also the chance of leading your reader astray, possibly by having them attached to a minor character who maybe should be introduced, chapter 2 or 3, that sort of thing. So maybe you'd have a focus on a core group of people, since it's going to be a space opera and it's going to be probably a fairly large cast. Maybe, are we talking like 10 or more major characters?
I haven't decided yet, but probably,
Yeah.
multiple
So
groups that have different types of conflicts that they resolve.
yeah, so maybe spend the time, invest time in the first scene, possibly, just throwing out an idea here, with no more than 3 characters, so that the reader has a chance to orient themselves. Because if this is a space opera, are we in the future?
Yes.
Or we're off planet.
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
So it's like sci-fi.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
My first scene, I'm blowing up the planet, so
Awesome.
everybody has to move on.
Awesome. Okay, so
uh,
I would orient the reader then to the story world that we're in. Name the ship that we're on, possibly, and this core group that's in charge of the ship. Whatever you want them to focus on, and then from there, slowly introduce more characters, because the reader needs.
It's okay to introduce a major character, 5 or 6 chapters in.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as the people that you're introducing early on are critical to your story, because there's, like we talked about, there's a reader expectation in the beginning of the story of, this is what the book is about. This is the person or people I should care about. So if you're going to switch gears and say, okay, and now we're going to switch to another part of the ship or to a different ship, maybe you've got chapter breaks at that point, because think of scenes in a movie where we're being introduced to a group of people, maybe the good guys in cops and robbers kind of a show. I'm not coming up with a great example, but just we're being introduced to a group of people, and then next scene we're being introduced to, these are the people that are plotting against the first group of people that we met, or they're going to meet 3 scenes later, and there's going to be an explosion and there's going to be a shootout between all these people, but we meet them individually or in small groups, so that we can orient ourselves to where we are and who we're with, and so that we're avoiding confusion. I learned that early on because I had a book I didn't finish, one of many, that I had. It was an office environment, and I just had a whole bunch of characters, and I thought I was creating kind of like a real story world with, it's an office. There's a lot of people in the office. And I just remember somebody telling me, I got so confused in the beginning. I didn't know what was going on. Who should I care about? And then I realized, oh, you have a point. So yeah, so think of the baby duck. Who is this baby duck going to attach themselves to? And if it's groups of people that you want us, the reader, to familiarize ourselves with and maybe identify with, that's great. Because the guy that wrote, why am I blanking on this? The HBO series Game of Thrones, he does this with chapters. It's Jon Snow's chapter, it's Arya's chapter, it's and he's changing focus chapter by chapter. So that's another way to go too, of group X chapter, group Y chapter, different spaceship chapter. I mean, you can identify it that way and really orient the reader to this is where we are now. You do it with your chapter breaks. You can do it.
Thank you.
Wow, that was good. Jan, do you have a question from Texas? Did you? Okay. Who has a question? Would anybody like to ask a question? Susan? Okay. You're muted, Susan. Everybody's muted.
No, I was just listening. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
It's very interesting, and thank you for
Yeah,
this.
I know. She's so talented.
Oh, thank you,
She
Susan.
can teach us about
Thank you,
everything.
Wendy.
Well, you're just awesome. I'm just so thrilled that you're here, and I'm just so excited, and I hope you'll want to come back because you're fabulous. You
Oh,
explain
thank you.
everything so clearly, and you have so much to share, so much knowledge. Joe?
Hopefully I wasn't too long-winded.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I could listen to you all day. Joe, do you have any comments or questions? Have you thought about, you're muted. Do you have you thought about writing?
What does it say? Well, I have, but I don't think I will write. But I thought I liked this presentation very much. I thought you really explained how you write a book and you know what you need to have and what the reader is looking for. I thought it was very good. Very
Oh,
good.
thank you.
Joe is
Yeah.
a social worker. She was a social worker in life. Cynthia, do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, no, questions, but I started reading the first one of your stiff.
Working Stiffs books?
Thank you. I'm like, I just was reading it just before I got on here. So that tells you my brain is really gone south. But I can't, I can't wait to finish it. You've got a really good writing style. And
Oh,
this
thank
is
you.
a really enjoyable talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And glad to have Rebecca here. Do you have any more questions, Rebecca? I know you're brimming with questions, and we're so lucky to have Wendy here. You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you. Okay.
Some would consider that a blessing, actually. I apologize to everybody. My cat unplugged my router.
Oh my goodness.
So apparently I wasn't paying enough attention. No, that was just, all my questions all stem from what I was asking before. It all goes into giving life to these things that just won't get out of my head. And I guess I feel intimidated, to be honest with you. I'm quite happy writing my little short stories. And which, by the way, even though they're short stories, basically have the same elements: a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
just that you have to, it's all compacted. You have to pick one issue and concentrate on that one issue. I'm learning it's very, very hard to have an ensemble in a short story.
Yes. Yeah.
But
You really have to focus.
Yeah. So, but with I'm thinking of that one story in particular. It's time to get down because it is even though it's been around since 1999, it's relevant to today's world. Yeah. It's almost like it was before its time. And that's not singing my song or anything like that. It's just looking back. I could have written it then, but I don't think it would have carried the impact that it would now.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, you said you're intimidated. You find this a little daunting. I wouldn't even go to a Romance Writers of America meeting for months after I joined. I was too intimidated to go because I thought that's where the real writers were. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think I qualified. I was was not brave enough to show my face. I was intimidated. And then I finally went there. I met a bunch of lovely people, and I started to realize, well, these people aren't published either. And a lot of these people are trying to learn as well. So I found myself in very good company. But what my point being, it's normal to feel intimidated, especially when you're trying something new that maybe is a little uncomfortable. But, you know, step by step, you can do it.
Actually, the reason that I haven't joined RWA is I'm stuck on that short story thing.
Yeah.
Because when you read the information, they talk about novelists,
Yeah.
you know. But I mean, those of us that write short stories and novellas, we're writers too when we write romances. And so that kind of put me off a little bit. But I had also been thinking, well, you know, be a rebel, join anyway. But
well, it's changed over the years, but I found it a real good place to learn and to meet people, you know, because just kind of like Stitch, it's a community. It's a community of writers, but you know, it's a real mixed bag too. It's published and unpublished, and lots of people that they're just, you know, there to talk books more than write books, but that's okay too. There's a place for everybody.
Well, as a writer, I get a lot of information listening to people who just read.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of information available online. It's not like it was when I first started out, because, you know, the internet was in its infancy when I first started out. I remember going to a meeting and somebody was talking about Google, and I'm there sitting there going, what's Google? So, you know, that shows how long ago it was. So but there's a place for everybody. And, you know, if where you want to be is writing short stories, there's a place for that. There's a market for short stories. It is difficult to write short stories. Someone was encouraging me to do it. You know, it's kind of like have it on your website, have it be, you know, like a leader to your books. And I thought, I don't know that I could write a short story. You know, how hard that is to write short. So, you know, more power to you for being able to do it.
Lori.
I've got another question. I was thinking about, you know, doing the kind of the Dr. Phil analysis on each of my characters, and, you know, write down the critical decisions in their life, and, you know, the different things that make up them. Do you think that would help? The more characters that I do that for, it'll make it more robust and give them a little bit more depth. Do you do that for?
It's good for you to know your characters, to give them backstories. I used to interview my characters. You know, I would ask, yeah, of course, it's all in your head, and someone listening to this that doesn't know we're talking about writing is going to go, well, she's just psychotic. But you're asking them questions, and you're waiting for that character to answer. You know, well, what was your childhood like? I don't want to talk about my childhood. Well, you had a childhood. Let's hear about it. Fine. You know, where you're going to hear, so you're going to hear the attitude. This character has some attitude. They're angry about something. You know, you may not know that until you start asking them questions, or doing the Dr. Phil thing, like you're talking about, of, you know, maybe have a questionnaire of, you know, how do you feel about this? Because you need to hear the character's voice in your head so that you can put that voice on the page. You know, there's body language. You need to be able to see this person kind of like a movie in your head. So, you know, because this is, we're using our words to convey emotion and character, you know, and the attitude that character has. And, you know, it's just the physical appearance and all that is one thing that's easy to do, but to put into the character's voice, their personality, I mean, that's where you need to know them. So ask them questions. I did early on. I had binders of, you know, these are my interviews with my characters. This is how they talk. This is, you know, where they really started taking shape. They became not just names on a page, they became story people. Which I know sounds weird, but they're real to me.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions? Well, I can't thank you enough, Wendy. I just think this has been just awesome and delightful to learn from you. And you have so much to teach and so much to give to everyone. And I certainly want you to feel welcome to come back. We would love to have you again. That would be awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so very much for coming, and we've learned so much from you. And
Okay,
I know
thank you.
everybody really enjoyed it. And I think we will close for now.